While in the craft, I discovered, just like you, many of you, that the craft is the institution of all law in our society of Canada and America. And how did that come to be? Why is that? Let's explore that today. The ritual. In every lodge, a newly initiated brother goes through the first degree. We tell him, here's your constitution, and here's our charter, and you should consider them when you have some time, and have a nice day. And that's pretty much the end of it. We never speak about it again, ever in lodge, and that's always seemed kind of strange. I've always wondered about that. It's such an important part, such a crucial part, and it's overlooked very often. The newly initiated brother doesn't understand the significance of it. Well, I thought I'd look into the parallels between having a constitution and the Masonic Constitution that even predated the American Constitution and the Canadian Charter. And of course, since many Freemasons are founding fathers and built these countries, it only makes sense to go deeper into how we even have the Constitution. We can consider America and Canada the greatest Masonic experiments. The Masonic Constitution, in reality, is the execution of Masonic ritual in practice. Freemasonry is built on ritual. In fact, it is ritual that is law in action. We perform it a degree. We don't just carry out a ceremony. We are demonstrating how law and governance work within a constitutional system. That's why our system is not a pure democracy. Believe it or not, the Masonic Constitution is a republic. Yes, we do have voting, and we don't allow just for things to happen blindly. We follow a paper that guides our actions and society, and that is what Canada and America are. There's a huge difference. We're not just following our own impulses and emotions. That would be no different than a dictator or even some of the monarchs which Masons try to not replicate. This is exactly why Freemasonry was created in the first place and why the countries of America and Canada were founded the way that they are. You can see it in the system of how our lodge is constructed. It's identical to a national governance. The worshipful master is like the Speaker of the House wielding the gavel to maintain order. We have bylaws and provinces and states the same way they have laws. Grand lodges operate a lot like federal governments. The similarity is there. The entire system was designed to reflect order, stability, and adhere to the constitutional principles rather than to just power. When you even look at the Constitution, there's things like silence. And silence is so important, especially when it comes to charity, because in order to help somebody, you must truly keep their secrets sacred. And that's why it's so important and why it's written into our Constitution. It's not just the right to plead the Fifth of America. Why does that law even exist? It's not just about avoiding self-incrimination. Silence is a form of protection. It allows the person to shield others, to protect the people that they in fact helped. And that's why it's so much more than just a tradition. It's a living demonstration of constitutional law in action. Now for history, the Masonic blueprint for nation building. If we want to understand how Masonic law shaped the legal foundations of North America, we need to first start at the original documents that set everything in motion. And there's two of them. The first one is the Magna Carta, the first step towards the Constitution. Before that, kings ruled by divine right, and whatever they said was law. The Magna Carta in 1215 challenged that by forcing King Edward of England to follow a legal structure. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it introduced a crucial idea that leaders should be accountable to something higher than themselves. That principle carried forward into Freemasonry and later into the founding of America and Canada. There was also Anderson's Constitution. Fast forward a few centuries and we have the Constitution of 1723, one of the most important documents of Freemasonry. This is a literal copy of it. You can get it pretty much online, and it has the same print, the same outlines, the same fonts, same photos. It's very impressive. I highly recommend studying it. James Anderson was a minister and was asked by the Grand Lodge of England to write down and to formalize the rules, history, and structure of Masonry. What he put together was the first Masonic Constitution. It did more than just set rules for lodges. It created a system of governance that would go on to influence nations. Now, before this, Freemasonry was just a loose fraternity, a brotherhood of traditions passed down through word of mouth, and there were scattered manuscripts. But in 1717, 4 lodges in England decided to come together, forming the Grand Lodge of England, the first real attempt at organizing Masonry on a large scale. The problem was they needed structure. something that they can unite under with common principles. And that's where Anderson came in. He pulled together all the rituals, the history, the records, the governing principles to form that Constitution. And the Grand Lodge adopted it in 1723. Now, from that point on, every Masonic body in the world followed this model that we're talking about here. Anderson's work wasn't just some rule book. It was a blueprint. It introduced some key ideas that later became part of modern legal systems. Governance by law. Lodge masters were elected, and power came from written constitution, not the personal authority of a leadership, similar to a monarchy previously. Religious tolerance. Anderson made it clear that Masonry wasn't tied to any single religion. It emphasized freedom of belief, a principle that was later written into the U.S. Constitution and the Canadian Charter. Equality among members. In all lodges, all men were equal, regardless of title, of status. And the idea carried over that belief into all citizens should be equal before the law. And silence as a protection, which we mentioned before. The ability to keep secrets, to plead the fifth in order to help somebody in distress sometimes requires discretion. Now, Masonic influence in nation building. Let's explore that. By the time the American Revolution, many of the founding fathers were Freemasons. They took the principles they learned in the lodge and helped build an entire country around them. George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and many other Masonic leaders were directly responsible for shaping the U.S. Constitution. In Canada, John A. Macdonald, a Freemason, was the country's first prime minister. In fact, there was the third prime minister, and the fifth prime minister was actually initiated in a lodge called St. Lawrence. I believe it was 602 under the United Grand Lodge of England, and is actually in this building right now. The lodge still exists. It's called St. Lawrence Zetlin. And many other premiers of Alberta, Nova Scotia, Ontario were also Masons at the time. They played a major role in shaping the Confederation. The entire structure of Canadian government, constitutional law, federalism, parliamentary governance aligns closely with Masonic principles. So in reality, this was the blueprint for a new world. Men who founded America and Canada weren't just running away from something, they were trying to build something even better. They understood that real freedom doesn't come from chaos, it comes from structured systems where law is above personal power. Here is a thought experiment. What is the need of Masonry in today's society? Of course, making men better, improving society, aid where it's needed. But it's more than that. If the world ever collapsed, if governments ever failed and society crumbled, the structure of Masonry already holds the blueprint to rebuild that civilization in its rituals, in its structure, in its governance, and in the principles of the craft. They are all designed to create order out of disorder. And if history has shown us anything, is that Freemasonry isn't just part of civilization, it is the craft that can restart it.